Solitude, silence, and prayer. If you've ever struggled with any of those three things, I'm right there with you. Uh, as a minister, sometimes it's hard just to shut out the noise. It's hard to not say anything. It's hard to just get quiet before God and shut out the noise and shut out everything. And I've been listening to this book by Henri Nouwen. It's called The Way of the Heart, and he talks about the Desert Fathers. And if you don't know who the Desert Fathers is, leave me a comment, and I'll make sure to make a video on it eventually. But just make a comment if you don't know who the Desert Fathers is. But the first part of this book talks about solitude. He talks about how the Desert Fathers went out into the desert to find that solitude, because at the time they were the reason why they went out to the desert was because the Christians had stopped being persecuted. And so there was this reason to be a Christian was, at first it was so I can be a blood witness to Christ. And so now when they're not persecuted, now it's, okay, now what? And so then it becomes this, I'm a witness to the darkness of this world. And so they wanted to get away from all the things that was going on and all the struggles that was happening. Most of this happened in, I think, Alexandria. But anyway, so they went out for the solitude, to get away from everything. And then to be in the silence, because, they believe that the silence is where you really hear from God. In the solitude, in the silence, and where you can really get into your heart. And where the heart becomes more compassionate, and the heart becomes that place where your ministry comes from, and where you are compassionate about other people and all of that kind of things. And then, the silence, James, in the book of James, he talks a lot about taming the tongue. A lot of times we sin just with what we say. And so the Desert Fathers, they believe that silence, we hear I think is in the movie theater, silence is golden. And silence sometimes is what we need, in this world where there is just words everywhere. You read them, you see them, you get them everywhere. There's words like on this map that's behind me of where I'm at. It's like, okay, I am surrounded by those things, and it keeps my brain just thinking about those words, and eventually we block out those words. And it comes the same way when we're in a church and we're listening to a pastor preach, and it's like words, and we start to block it out because they just keep going and going. But in that silence, that's where we get to know God. That's where we get to find our inner peace. And when we talk about prayer, you see, prayer is praying without ceasing. Silence and praying without ceasing is key to being closer to God. And when we do that, when we are praying and we are quiet before God. Now, when I say praying, I don't mean just constantly talking to God. And most of the time we're just talking at God. We're not talking with God. And so, think about your prayer life. When you're silent, your prayer should be nice and short. God, I love you. Just gratitude toward him, gratitude toward what he's doing in your life, gratitude. But this morning, I just want you to take a pause this morning. Take a pause and just and let God just speak to you. Let your heart and your mind just become one. Let the things of your heart become one with God. Become one with your mind and who you are. And I encourage you this morning, just take, just a couple of minutes. And I guarantee you start doing that over the next few days, and then the months and the years, things will start to change in your life. You can increase it from 1 time to 2 times a day to 3 times a day. Pretty soon you're just praying without ceasing. See, prayer is not about just us talking at God all the time. It's about us being quiet. It's about us being silent. It's us taming our tongue. And that's the important thing. Hey, if you like this video, I've got a devotional, a 7-day soul reset devotional that's out. If you want it, leave your email in the comments and I'll be sure to get that back to you. If you have not subscribed to the channel, it is free to do that. I would appreciate you guys if you would just subscribe. I'd love to start going live on some of these walks that I do, and just hearing your comments and hearing what you're doing, and even having some live prayer meetings where we can just be silent before God, but we can bring our petitions to God and all that. So, hey, you guys have a great day. I will talk to you soon. Bye.